So just explain further what will happen with European arrest warrants if we leave without a deal on the 31st of October, and how that will work with other countries.
Sure. So for anybody in the system, and by that I mean in custody at the moment, who has been arrested on a European arrest warrant but hasn't yet been extradited, there's been a statutory instrument that was laid, I think, in June of this year, which means we can continue to deal with those. So they won't be released. We can continue to deal with those individuals, and they will be extradited back to the country where they were originated from.
So just on that, how long potentially after the 31st of October could that still be happening?
It's a statutory instrument, so anybody that's been arrested prior.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But say they're arrested on the 31st of October, could they still be going through the system in December, January?
Possibly.
Yeah, so
there's no time limit.
There's no time limit. You're not in a rush to do anything with it.
As long as you've not been arrested on the 1st of November, that's when it changes.
Okay.
For the others, so those for European arrest warrants that we currently have, but we haven't arrested anybody on, we have to convert those to red notices and put them on Interpol. So they would then be dealt with when they're arrested post the 31st of October under the 1957 Convention Act, so under Extradition Act. And the same for other countries. So if they have people that they want us to arrest on their behalf post the 31st of October, if that's when we leave without a deal, then again it would come down to the Convention of Europe on 1957 and extradition.
And with the 1957 Convention, how much more difficult or complex is it going to be, therefore, from the 1st of November rather than the 31st of October?
It's certainly slow.
Can you give us examples of what you will have to do from the 1st of November that you wouldn't have had to do on the 31st of October if we leave without a deal?
Yeah, so for everybody that we want to arrest, or somebody wants us to arrest, we would have to go to Westminster Magistrates and get a warrant.
And that's the only court in the country that does that?
Yeah, that's currently the only country, So instead of having a power of arrest directly, we'd have to go and get a warrant. What that means is if we have an advance notice of somebody coming to this country who's wanted, we can quickly go off and get a warrant and then hope to intervene as they land. If we don't know they're here, and again, sort of the example I gave earlier on, that somebody's presented to you as an officer, you don't know, but you find out on the Interpol system they're wanted, then unless you have a different power of arrest to detain them, you can't detain them until you've gone and get a warrant. So the risk is, of course, you've got somebody in front of you for a serious offence, there's no other grounds for you to arrest that individual, then you can't stop them.
And how does the alert system work? So you've spoken about what happens when you arrest someone, but how much more complicated potentially will it be to get that information to other countries, and for other countries to get that information to the UK?
It's complicated in the way that it's a manual system, so it's not linked directly to your system, so there is a time delay for a start. You've then got to fill out a form that's accepted by the NCA Bureau, which then goes on to Interpol. So you're manually filling these things out as opposed to them going on automatically. So that obviously builds in part of a delay for you. And of course, you've got to be conscious that they're going overseas as well for you to be able to put that on. So it's a bit of a time lag. It's a manual system, and you've got to make sure, hope that all of our European partners will be looking at the Interpol system. If you turn that on its head, instead of us checking one system at the moment, so again, your police officer scenario checks the police national computer in the UK, that would automatically tell them where they're wanted overseas. That officer has to remember that not only do they need to check the PNC in the future, they would have to ask for an Interpol check at the same time. So it's having to make sure that busy people understand there are now two different systems they've got to kind of check rather than one.
It may be helpful if I just come in at this point. So I wouldn't want to mislead the committee here. So it is absolutely right, it is a manual process, but we are introducing automation which speeds up the process. So I wouldn't want to give the impression there is a significant time lag between an EU member state putting an Interpol red notice onto I-24/7 and that being transitioned and updated onto the police national computer. That is a matter of hours, same day process, because we are investing and have invested in the UK International Criminality Bureau to make sure that we are as slick and as effective as possible, because clearly it would be highly risky to have a backlog of cases where there were red notices available that were not known to operational officers. So that transition is being done very swiftly.
Just two final points. Is potentially the biggest blockage then going to be the Magistrates Court? How worried are you? How well prepared are they to deal with potentially a large number of cases coming to them to be seen that previously they hadn't?
I don't know is the answer. I don't know how their preparations are going, but I think it's clear to say, of course, if there is suddenly 1,500 cases that you're now asking for a warrant on, where we probably averaged about 40 to 50 extraditions before that under the old Act, then there is a volume and a demand that will be placed upon them.
But finally, from me, you would say, would you say that you are confident you have done enough to prepare for this? That measures are in place. You know what you have to do. You will minimise time lags as much as possible. And ultimately, if we do leave without a deal, there are still procedures in place to get these criminals off the streets.
Yes. Everything we've done, I think, since March certainly has been about trying to close that gap between current operational capability and what we may have to fall back on. There's been an enormous amount of work done with colleagues such as the NCA and ACRO and the Home Office to try and do this, the sort of semi-automation pilot I've talked about around missing people, the stuff that Steve's just talked about that sort of semi-robotic process they're doing. So we've constantly tried to hone down time lag, demand on forces. So from my point of view, of course, mine's everything from missing people all the way through. This is about all of policing. So for us, it's about being very conscious that whatever we do, whatever we design, whatever we try and change policy, it's about trying to cut down demand. And one of the things we just talked about extradition is we're currently in discussions with the Home Office about introducing a power of arrest for red notices. So of course we know that's one of our kind of biggest challenges. So the argument we've put forward is that actually if we are working with member states in the EU at the moment, so we trust their processes under the ECHR, that's why we use European arrest warrants with them, why wouldn't we have a power of arrest for a red notice in relation to those 27 member states? So what we're trying to do is close that gap that says I don't want an officer being put in a really tricky position where they've got somebody wanted for a serious offence in front of them and they can't do anything with it.
Would that require primary legislation?
It would, yes.
And have you seen any drafting of primary legislation?
It's being drafted with the Home Office. My understanding is it won't be in before October the 31st, but they're hoping to get it into the next session.
Just if I may follow up on your question, have we done everything we can? I think we have, but just to reiterate, point maybe already made, the caveat on all this is a lot of our functionality does depend on EU member states' use of the I-24/7 system. For some, that is already business as usual. For others, it will require them to some additionality. And that we have been working incredibly hard with a process of engagement right across Europe, explaining the challenges that we face and seeking assurances that the Interpol system will be heavily used. We've been encouraged by the response. It's absolutely clear that EU member states want to continue to work closely, operationally with us. We will have to see just how effective that process is.
Yeah.
I think we were first told about looking to get primary legislation in for red notices back in the spring, maybe sort of February, March time.
Right.
Has it been being discussed for a long time?
It's certainly been driven forward. I think the initial conversations we had were, why haven't we got one? How can we make this better? Obviously, I think at that time we were driving towards the 29th of March, as was. And since then, obviously, we've upped the gear and the tempo with the Home Office to try and push this through. So I think there's been more appetite, certainly, since the 29th of March.
It just has a slight thing of why is this not ready in time?
It's a power that we would welcome.
Absolutely.